We are covering the NFL Draft like no one else is here on the Ravens Rundown, as we'll catch up to speed with a couple of important visits that the Ravens are having with Jaxon Smith-Njigba as well as Anthony Richardson, and all this happening amid the Lamar Jackson contract negotiations and with OBJ coming to town. What does all this mean? Could the Ravens be trading up for Anthony Richardson? We'll discuss all of that coming up in a matter of moments. In the meantime, though, I need you to subscribe to our brand new NFL Draft channel here by Chat Sports as we get closer to the draft, less than 2 weeks away at this point. You got to head over and subscribe to the channel as we're doing mock drafts for teams in particular. Also, we are doing coverage of exclusive interviews of players that are going to be picked, have their names called. We have all sorts of stuff that you need to check out over on our NFL Draft channel. We want the flock to represent, so head over there, subscribe now, turn on notifications. We'll get started with today's show. Welcome in, Ravens Rundown by Chat Sports. Tyler Jones here with you. Thanks for joining us. Let's begin today with Jaxon Smith-Njigba, as the Ravens are set to have a top 30 visit with the Ohio State wide receiver. That's according to Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network. And it's interesting that this visit is about to happen, considering that OBJ is coming to Baltimore, agreeing to a contract. Still waiting on that to be official. But I'll say this much. When you look at this possibility of Jaxon Smith-Njigba and that 22nd overall pick, I would say that whether it's JSN or other receivers in the draft, just because you're paying that money for OBJ, and it is a lot of money, that shouldn't stop the Ravens from adding guys like JSN or other receivers. That OBJ shouldn't just be the only guy that you look to, that you should consider all options involved when it comes to bettering that position, because OBJ is simply not going to be enough. You're going to need more than that. You look at JSN in particular, third-team All-American in 2021, but I thought that he was much more deserving than just a third-team All-American that year. Remember, he played alongside the likes of Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and his numbers were better than both those guys at Ohio State that year. He did miss most of this season with a hamstring injury, and I think Ravens fans are going to be alarmed anytime we talk about a player and in injury history, considering what the Ravens have gone through the last couple of years. But I don't think that's going to be something that lingers him moving on to the NFL career, that hamstring issue. Comparison-wise, very similar to Jarvis Landry on paper. The numbers that I talked about, how good they were, nearly 17 yards of reception back in 2021 with 95 catches, 1,600 yards, and 9 touchdowns. JSN, I'm telling you, is that dude. I would be more than pleased to see him in a Ravens uniform. Should Baltimore draft Jaxon Smith-Njigba? I got more on JSN I want to tell you about, as well as look at some other potential receivers here in a moment. But want to hear from you guys first. This is our pinned comment today. You might get an ad break. If so, take advantage of it. Get your votes in. Let me know one way or the other. Why for yes, in for no. Should the Ravens draft Jaxon Smith-Njigba or not? Let me know in the comments section below. So it's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine, Keegan Renault, who works with RPM Data, a NFL draft data analysis company. And what he was telling me was that a lot of these scouts and the experts, if you will, are saying that JSN is the only true wide receiver number one in this upcoming draft. And with that, once you get past JSN, according to him and the scouts that he's talked to, there is a belief that the next core of receivers is kind of not inseparable of sorts, that they're all pretty similar, that they all are probably wide receiver 2 types. The JSN might be the only one that could be a wide receiver 1. And so there's a lot of value, essentially. And I've said before, the Ravens need to draft receivers. I will hammer that home all day long. But just because, let's say that they might not get a receiver in the first round. If JSN's gone and they decide to go another position with that pick at 22, that doesn't mean that there aren't other options at the receiver spot that they could look at with their other picks. This is Mel Kiper's rankings. Now, Mel, for whatever reason, is high on Zay Flowers, but remember, Mel is also high on Will Levis as his number 1 quarterback in the draft, so take that as you will. But with that said, you look at these other receivers that are around that are going to be available in the second, third round, some of those other options there. It's pretty fascinating. I think Flowers, Smith-Njigba, Addison, and Johnston all have first-round potential. But Jalen Hyatt, Josh Downs, all those guys are pretty solid. I mean, heck, one guy that I've been talking about a lot and I think deserves a lot of attention, and producer Tex has heard me mention his name a few times, is Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. I think Marvin Mims has a lot of potential, and we'll talk more on him in just a second. I want to show you some stuff on Mims, but Jonathan Mingo's not bad. Tillman, Jaden Reed, A.T. Perry, even Tank Dell. Tank Dell, who Mel has tied for a top 10 receiver spot, which out of 12 names, I think that's kind of a cop-out move, but that's a whole nother thing. Tank Dell, I think, is a very fascinating prospect. So, with that said, you look at guys like Mims, Dell as day 3 wide receiver targets. I would say this, if you don't get JSN, if he's already taken by that 22 spot, and you decide to go another option if you're the Baltimore Ravens, and you pick receivers later, there are guys that very much intrigue me that you could still be very good with, very well off with, with one of those selections later on in the draft that could be sticking around. I want to tell you more about Mims and Tank Dell in a second. Before we do, speaking of the draft hats are on sale now while supplies last. These are the same hats that future members of the Baltimore Ravens are going to be wearing on draft night. We have these flat bill versions that are in black and white, and I got to tell you, these things are looking pretty snazzy. You can still get yours now, right in time for the NFL Draft. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead and get your orders in. chatsports.com/RavensDraft to get your draft hats today, and you are going to be styling and profiling and representing the flock in stellar fashion, if I say so myself. Get yours now, chatsports.com/RavensDraft to get yours today. That's chatsports.com/RavensDraft. Let's start with Marvin Mims now, and Marvin Mims is, according to Mel there, the number 7 receiver on his big board. But I got to tell you, I see a lot in Marvin Mims that tells me that he's better than the number 7 receiver in this draft. I know Mel's got him towards the end of the second round, the last pick to Kansas City in his latest mock draft. But if you're the Ravens and if you have to trade up to the end of the first round or can get him in the third, I think you'll be glad you did with what Marvin Mims brings to the table. His career numbers, this is a guy that averaged nearly 20 yards or reception. He is a big play threat with 20 touchdowns, close to 2,400 career receiving yards, and 123 receptions at the University of Oklahoma. I'm telling you, Marvin Mims could be that guy and could be a nice find for the Baltimore Ravens potentially. Another guy I really like is Tank Dell, who Mel has all the way towards the bottom. And this guy, I'm telling you, was just so impressive at the University of Houston as he was able to string together the single-season record for touchdowns. He had 17 touchdowns last year. Had a ton of yards, just a very good possession receiver that has a knack for finding the football. 2-time first-team All-American Athletic Conference 2021-2022, and is drawing comparisons to Darnell Mooney, which is a pretty decent company as far as I'm concerned with Tank Dell. So that could be a very good find potentially there in the later rounds come day 3. Lance Erline's scouting report on Tank Dell. This I got to tell you, I really like to hear. Every second of the route is a separation opportunity for Dell, a touchdown-making machine. You like to hear that. Who pairs electrifying top-end speed with twitchy, short area quickness. His routes are fast and effective in all 3 levels with keen ball tracking, talent deep, and sideline dotting footwork. That's the scouting report. Sounds pretty good if you ask me. So, if you had to pick a wide receiver, let's say all things are equal here. You can get Marvin Mims towards the end of the second round, beginning of the third round. Might have to trade up to get him. Or get Tank Dell, let's say later in the third or in the fourth, whatever it may be. All things considered, what situation do you like better? The idea of bringing in Marvin Mims or the idea of bringing in Tank Dell? Type MM for Marvin Mims. Type TD for Tank Dell. Let me know which way you would prefer, which wide receiver you'd rather have, Mims or Dell, all things considered. Folks, we have reached the 9 9,107 subscriber milestone, and we are trying to get to 9.2 thousand subscribers now. Let's continue to build this channel so we can bring you more Baltimore Ravens content. Subscribe now for free. Doesn't cost you a thing. YouTube.com/Ravens TV. Turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. It is YouTube.com/Ravens TV. Subscribe today. We're talking draft, trade, free agency, and more. This is the channel for you. We got live shows as well here on the channel. Check us out and subscribe today. Anthony Richardson is set to have a top 30 visit with the Baltimore Ravens. And this is fascinating, right? The idea of looking at Anthony Richardson, because when we started the draft process of looking at potential quarterbacks and guys that would be available were Baltimore picks at 22, at the end of the season, Anthony Richardson seemed like a guy that would be potentially around at 22. Well, now his stock with his performance at the Combine and at the Pro Day, people fell in love with his measurables, and he's still a relatively young guy. His stock has really gone through the roof. He's not going to be available in the Ravens pick at 22. I'd be shocked if he was. I think that he's not falling out of the top four. With the demand that there is at the quarterback position, I think right now there's a pretty decent chance that the top four quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, Arizona holds the number 3 pick. I think there's a good chance they trade down. Somebody else jumps into that spot, and Indianapolis is there at that 4 spot. So you could go all 4 quarterbacks with those first 4 picks. So if you're Baltimore, you're looking at a situation where if you want Anthony Richardson, you're going to have to trade up to the top 4. If you want him, you're going to have to go up there, and it's going to cost you a bit to get up there and get up to one of those top 4 selections to bring in Anthony Richardson. And remember, all this is going on while we're talking about Lamar Jackson and his contract situation, of whether he'll be back or not. More on Lamar here in just a second. But first, let's start with Richardson here. The numbers on Richardson, he is a project. He is not going to be ready to start day one wherever he goes, as he's coming off a career that included a less than 54% completion percentage, less than 2,600 passing yards, 26 touchdowns, 9 interceptions there for Richardson. He is a project. I am very concerned about the accuracy. We have not seen a quarterback of this caliber that's been hyped up this much with as bad of a completion percentage as Anthony Richardson is. To me, that's the biggest reason why I'm out on Anthony Richardson, besides the idea of having to give up so much to trade up for Richardson. With that, though, of the Anthony Richardson rumblings and the top 30 visit that he's going to have with the Ravens, ESPN's reporting that there's no momentum towards a new contract since the agreement that was in place with Odell Beckham Jr., which I find very fascinating, right? You would think, okay, was that the thing that was going to push the Ravens over the top to get a deal done with Lamar Jackson, was having a deal with OBJ. Remember, we've seen the photos of the call between OBJ and Lamar and the excitement there, and we heard that Lamar was recruiting OBJ, but this new update from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler says that it hasn't changed on that front. Here's more from Fowler. The Ravens hope so. I spoke to somebody in the building who said that maybe this will help move things along with Lamar. As far as I know, there's no clarity on Lamar Jackson's situation. People I'm talking to believe that there's still no momentum on his contractual front. But the Ravens, they can give a little nudge here and say, hey, when you want to sign that franchise tag tender, if you want to sign it, or if we can work something out where you're a Raven next year, we got you some help on the outside. I think the most likely outcome when this is all said and done is that the Ravens don't draft a quarterback. I don't see them trading up for Anthony Richardson or Will Levis or any of those guys up there. I don't think that happens. But I don't also see them drafting, overreaching for a guy like Hendon Hooker or something like that at 22. I don't think they're drafting a quarterback in the first round. And it doesn't seem like, as we mentioned there's any momentum on a new contract for Lamar Jackson at this point in time. But Lamar's still a good guy. We saw the way that he handled things as a professional last year. I think that he still comes back to Baltimore, but on the franchise tender. I think that's your most likely scenario, is the Ravens don't draft a quarterback this time around, but Lamar comes back on the franchise tender, and we keep still playing the waiting game on seeing if he gets a new contract or not. I think that's the most likely scenario here. Who will be the Ravens starting quarterback in 2023? Will it be Lamar Jackson? Will it be a guy like Anthony Richardson? Tyler Huntley, potentially? Let me know in the comments section who you think the Ravens starting quarterback will be next season. As always, you can act with me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Tyler Jones Live. That's where you can find me there. I'll see you next time right here on the channel. Thanks for joining us.